Our modern society runs on energy. However, we can no longer afford to run on fossil fuel energy due to its effects on the environment. The future of energy will therefore rely on renewable energy resources. In order to become a sustainable energy society, renewable resources need to be connected to energy users. This means we must redesign the power grid. So what is the power grid?
The electrical grid is a network of power plants and transformers connected by miles and miles and miles of power lines carrying different amounts of voltage. The grid is designed to get power from the places that make it to the places that need it, when those places are usually not in the same place.
So how does the power grid get energy to everyday people?
The way we receive our electricity hasn't changed much in the last 100 years. A coal, nuclear, or hydro power plant sends electricity through transmission lines to substations and on to transformers. Finer and finer wires and smaller voltages until the electricity reaches your laptop or iPhone plugged into the wall.
The power grid is a vast system connecting people to electricity in order to meet their daily energy needs. However, this system is more of a patchwork of smaller grids connected together rather than one cohesive system. The power grid is an essential part of everyday life, but the grid infrastructure is aging and beginning to deteriorate.
The ASCE notes that some of the electrical grid and pipeline distribution systems that make up America were originally built more than 130 years ago. This aging infrastructure means that in recent years there has been an increase in power failures.
The power grid infrastructure is in desperate need of improvements, but this comes with an estimated multi-billion-dollar price tag. The current power grid is also primarily connected to fossil fuel power plants. This means that there currently aren't any transmission lines in some of the locations where sustainable energy sources are located. The optimal locations to generate solar energy are primarily in the southwest, while wind and hydropower have prime locations in the Midwest. The problem is that these prime energy sources are located in remote areas far away from the grid. This means that new long-distance power lines will have to be constructed in order to access these energy sources. Expanding the grid infrastructure will be a costly governmental undertaking, but it will also encourage investors to construct more solar PV and wind turbine farms because there will finally be a way to transport energy generated from these areas. However, the cost of expanding the current grid infrastructure is not the only problem preventing renewable energy from being integrated into the grid. The real problem is that solar, wind, and hydro are all intermittent energy sources. Intermittent energy sources are variable, meaning that they do not provide a consistent supply of energy for reasons that cannot be controlled. For instance, solar PV panels cannot generate energy at night and realistically only have the capacity to generate power for a few hours during the day. Similarly, wind turbines do not generate energy when the wind isn't blowing. This intermittency makes it difficult for the power grid to solely rely on renewable energy sources.
It's fairly easy with coal and gas generators. You just fire one up when you need electricity. But solar and wind are less predictable, with hard-to-predict demand on one side and hard-to-predict production on the other.
Expanding the current power grid to include long-distance and cross-country transmission lines will help to combat intermittency by integrating multiple renewable resources into the system. This way, when the wind isn't blowing to generate power in Iowa from turbines, solar power from PV panels in Arizona can help to meet energy demands. Another problem with using renewable energy in the current grid system is that it currently has no way to store energy.
Unfortunately, electricity is the most perishable commodity in the world. It cannot be stored. It must therefore be used in the same second it is produced.
Since the current grid requires energy to be used right away, batteries may become a part of the future grid. Incorporating large-scale batteries into the grid is a potential solution that will also help solve the intermittency problem of renewables. Batteries will allow the grid to store the excess energy renewable sources generate during times of low energy demand to be used during peak energy demand. Redesigning the power grid is an important step to transitioning from fossil fuel to renewable energy. The current grid cannot accommodate renewable energy sources because they are remote, intermittent, and cannot be stored. Creating long-distance transmission lines will connect these remote resources to the grid and allow the energy source in one area to compensate for intermittency of a source in another area. Integrating batteries into the grid will also provide stored energy to help meet energy demands. This new grid design will be a vital part of the transition to a sustainable energy society.